The evening air was calm, almost gentle. Traffic lights blinked lazily at the intersection, and the distant hum of the city blended with the sound of footsteps on concrete. It was the kind of ordinary moment people forgot as soon as it passed. For Ava Richardson, it was about to become unforgettable. She stood near her parked car, coat buttoned neatly, posture straight from years of discipline that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with responsibility. Her hair was pulled back simply. No jewelry. No visible rank. No uniform. Just a black woman standing alone on a quiet street. The patrol car slowed before it stopped. Red. Blue. The lights reflected off the windows of nearby buildings, turning glass into fractured mirrors. Ava noticed it immediately. She always noticed things immediately. Awareness had kept her alive in places far more dangerous than this. 2 officers stepped out. Officer Blake was the first. Tall. Confident. The kind of confidence that came from never being questioned. His partner, Officer Mills, stayed half a step behind, eyes scanning, hand resting casually near his belt. "Evening, ma'am," Blake said, voice already edged with suspicion. "Mind telling me what you're doing here?" Ava turned slowly, deliberately, the way she had been trained to do, no sudden movements, no defensiveness. "I'm getting into my car," she replied calmly. Blake glanced at the vehicle. "This your car?" "Yes." "Registration?" She reached into her coat slowly and handed it over. Blake studied it longer than necessary. "You live around here?" he asked. "Yes." "Funny," he muttered. "We've had reports of suspicious activity." Ava met his eyes. "What kind of activity?" Blake's jaw tightened. "There you go," he said. "That tone." Her brow furrowed slightly, not in anger, but confusion. "I'm asking a question." "You're talking back," Blake snapped. Mills shifted uncomfortably. "Sir," Ava said evenly, "I'm cooperating." Blake laughed, a short, humorless sound. "Everyone says that." A few pedestrians slowed their pace. A woman across the street paused with her phone halfway out of her pocket. A man shook his head faintly, already knowing how this scene usually ended. Ava felt it too. That familiar tightening in the chest. Not fear. Recognition. This wasn't about suspicious activity. It never was. Blake handed the registration back harder than necessary. "Turn around," he said. Ava blinked. "Am I being detained?" "Turn around." "Officer," she said calmly, "on what grounds?" That was enough. Blake grabbed her arm. The movement was sudden, unnecessary. Ava stiffened instinctively, training kicking in, not to fight, not to flee, but to stabilize herself. Mills stepped forward. "Hey! Cuff her," Blake ordered. Metal clicked shut around her wrists. The sound was louder than it should have been. A woman in the crowd gasped. "That's not right," someone whispered. Ava's heart beat steadily. Once. Twice. Controlled. She had stood under enemy fire without flinching. She had briefed presidents. She had buried soldiers. And now, she stood handcuffed on a city sidewalk for talking back. Blake leaned close. "You people always think you're smarter than us." The words slid into the air like poison. Ava looked at him, not with rage, not with tears. With disappointment. "I think," she said quietly, "you're making a mistake." Blake smirked. "Get in the car." Rain began to fall lightly as they guided her into the back seat. The door slammed shut. Inside the cruiser, Ava sat upright, cuffs resting against her coat, the cold biting into her skin. She closed her eyes briefly. Not to pray. Not to panic. To remember. She remembered her first day at the academy, how they told her twice she didn't belong there. She remembered the first soldier who called her ma'am with real respect. She remembered the oath she took, not to power, but to people. Her phone buzzed once in her pocket. She ignored it. Not yet. The cruiser pulled away. The station was worse. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. A television murmured in the corner. Officers laughed behind the desk. Blake walked her in like a trophy. "Found us another one," he announced. Ava was guided to a bench. The cuffs stayed on. Time passed strangely there, too slow, too loud. Blake told the story again. Embellished. Mocked her attitude. Each word landed heavier than the last. A young officer glanced at Ava, then quickly looked away. Ava sat still. She had learned long ago that dignity was sometimes the loudest form of resistance. Finally, she spoke. "I would like to make my phone call." Blake sighed theatrically. "Already?" "Yes." "Calling a lawyer?" "No." "What, then?" he sneered. "My office." Something in her voice shifted the air. Blake unlocked one cuff just enough for her to hold the phone. "Make it fast." Ava took the phone. Her hands did not shake. She dialed. 1 ring. 2. "Pentagon Operations," came the voice on the other end. "Colonel Hayes speaking." Ava straightened fully now. "This is General Ava Richardson," she said clearly. "Identification code Delta 79er Alpha." The room changed. Blake frowned. "What did you say?" On the other end of the line, there was silence. Then, "Yes, General." Mills's eyes widened. Ava continued calmly. "I have been detained by local law enforcement under questionable circumstances. I require immediate verification and command notification." "Yes, ma'am." "Stay on the line." Blake stepped closer, irritation cracking into uncertainty. "Ma'am, enough of this." The voice on the phone cut through, suddenly sharp. "Officer, you are addressing a United States general. Do not interrupt." The front desk froze. Phones began to ring. One. Then another. Footsteps echoed from down the hall. A door opened. And for the first time since the cuffs clicked shut, Ava Richardson allowed herself a single breath of something like relief. Not because help had come, but because truth finally had. The call that shook the station and the silence that followed. The first siren arrived before anyone fully understood what was happening. Not a police siren. A military escort. The low, unmistakable sound rolled through the street outside the station like distant thunder. Heads turned. Conversations stopped. Even Officer Blake felt it in his chest before he could name it. "What's going on?" someone whispered. Ava Richardson remained seated, phone still in her hand, voice calm as stone. "Yes, Colonel. I'll remain where I am." She ended the call and placed the phone gently on the desk. No smile. No satisfaction. Just certainty. Within minutes, the station doors opened again, this time with purpose. 2 men in dark suits entered first. Their posture alone shifted the room's gravity. Behind them walked a uniformed officer whose presence demanded instinctive respect, Brigadier General Marcus Hale. Every officer in the room stood without being told. Except Blake. He was frozen. "Captain Reynolds," General Hale said, voice firm but controlled. "I'm here regarding the unlawful detention of General Ava Richardson." The captain's face drained of color. "General, we didn't." Ava stood. The cuffs were removed immediately. No ceremony. No excuses. "I'm fine," she said quietly, though the room knew she meant much more than her wrists. General Hale turned slowly, his gaze landing on Blake like a verdict. "Which officer made the arrest?" No one spoke. Blake swallowed. "I did." "On what grounds?" She was uncooperative. Ava met Blake's eyes one last time. "I asked a question," she said softly. Silence fell. "Officer," General Hale replied, "you will turn in your badge and weapon immediately." Blake's hands trembled as he complied. Outside, news vans began to arrive. Someone had leaked the body cam footage. The laughter. The phrase "you people." The cuffs. By morning, the story was everywhere. The nation watches. Headlines scrolled endlessly. Black woman handcuffed for talking back revealed as U.S. General. Pentagon confirms wrongful arrest. Officers suspended after body cam release. Ava watched none of it. She sat in her office at the Pentagon, uniform finally visible, medals catching the light not as decoration, but as history. Colonel Hayes stood nearby. "Public statement is ready whenever you are, ma'am." Ava nodded slowly. "Not yet. What would you like to say?" She thought for a moment. "The truth," she replied. Without anger. The fall of authority. Officer Blake's suspension turned into termination within 48 hours. Captain Reynolds resigned. Federal oversight was announced. Mandatory bias and de-escalation training was ordered statewide. But the most unexpected moment came a week later. Ava requested a meeting with Blake. The room was quiet. Neutral. No cameras. Blake looked smaller now. Civilian clothes. No shield. No swagger. "I didn't know," he muttered. "If I'd known who you were." Ava raised her hand gently. "That's exactly the point." He looked up. "You shouldn't need to know who someone is to treat them with respect." His eyes filled. "I ruined everything." "No," Ava said. "You revealed it." She stood. "I won't erase the consequences of your actions. But I won't add cruelty to them either. Learn. Change. Or this story will repeat with someone who doesn't have my platform." Blake nodded, broken but listening. The final address. Weeks later, Ava stood before a room full of new recruits. She rolled up her sleeve. The faint mark from the cuffs was still there. "This," she said, "is what happens when authority forgets humanity." The room was silent. "I wasn't strong because of my rank," she continued. "I was strong because I stayed human." She paused. "Kindness is not weakness. Dignity is not defiance. And respect should never depend on who you think someone is." One recruit stood. Then another. Then the entire room. Not applause. Understanding. Ava smiled softly. Justice had been served. But more importantly, a lesson had been learned. Sometimes power doesn't shout. Sometimes justice comes quietly. And sometimes, one calm voice changes everything.